send an example right now. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many names from all over the country on the call. And we also have a few people calling in. There's hello. Okay, and if you, great. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who are still joining us, we're typing into the chat box where we're coming from, your name, your organization, and where in the country you're reaching out from. And we're going to get a chance to talk more in just a little. So welcome to everyone as they join us. Yes, and thank you, Rabbi Finman. It was reminding us that if you are not speaking, and we will have a lot of chances to speak throughout the call, to please mute yourself right now, and I might go ahead and mute you if you are on video, but if you are on the phone, please go ahead and mute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again. This is Shaked. I'm with the Hazon Seal with Rachel and Jeremy. Just as a reminder, you can type questions into the chat box at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a little chat option, but you will have time for Q&A throughout this webinar. And we do encourage a lot of questions. We'll try to answer them as they come up. And again, just mute yourself when you're not speaking, as Rabbi Finman mentioned. And just going to go over a brief agenda for today's webinar. So we want to welcome all the sites for being here. We're really excited for this webinar on PR and sustainability. Well, as you all know, it's the first night of Hanukkah. We'll talk a little bit about Hanukkah and sustainability. And our main focus will be using sustainability to strengthen your organization's story. So Jeremy Kranowitz, who's the new Managing Director of Sustainability here at Hazon, who some of you may not have yet met, will talk about that. And you'll have some time for Q&A. We'll hear a little bit from a few of the sites, a few of the field sites, and then after that, we'll go into some breakout groups where we'll talk about some techniques, go over some discussion questions. And then near the end, Rachel and I will go over the timeline and next steps for the different cohorts. Sorry about that. And so here we have all of our sites as of today. We have a really big growing community throughout the country, and we're really excited to welcome especially the fall 2017 sites. This is their first official webinar since orientation, so welcome. And here you can see we're basically all over the country at this point, and we're hoping to expand and have stars all over that map. So this is where you can see yourself in relation to all the different cohorts and all the different sites. And just as a reminder, the Hazon Seal application for the winter cohort is now open through mid-January. So we really encourage you to invite people in your community, invite other organizations that you might know to apply. There's no one better than you as an advocate as part of the Seal to join this cohort. And yeah, the information is on that website. And yes.
And we're going to send out a sample email to everybody that allows you, that has a little bit more information on the SEAL application, and really encourage you to forward this out to other sites within your community. There's nothing stronger than having a whole community that's devoted to environmental sustainability. There are a couple people on this call who maybe works with some friends and neighbors to become more sustainable, so definitely reach out to that. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about Hanukkah and sustainability. Is Rabbi Rubenstein on the call? I don't think I saw him. Rabbi Rubenstein, are you here? No, I don't think so. Okay. You're still seeing our cover slide. Huh. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. We will, let me play that out. Okay. Well, we're going to share right now. Can you see this picture that's up right now of the potato? Can I see a thumbs up from people if you can see the potato? Great, you can see the potato. Okay, great. So Rabbi Michael Bernholtz from Temple Beth Shalom in Florida reached out to us to let him know that he had done something super innovative with Chanukias and potatoes. So I'm going to invite him just to share a little bit about what he's been doing with this creative alternative energy project. Rabbi Michael, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So this was an outgrowth of a project that I had done as part of our Shabbat at the shore. I had found out about potato batteries, how you could use copper and zinc leads with different vegetables that they react to the acid to create a little bit of an electric current that could power a clock or could power a light. And my children, who are now in high school and middle school, had done a few different science fair projects with potato batteries, and I had actually seen some research that's happening in Israel about potato batteries. And obviously, as you're growing potatoes for Hanukkah, how awesome would it be to take a potato battery and the latke and bring them together and make a latke menorah. And so what you're seeing before you is actually the first prototype of the latke menorah that one of my congregants constructed for us. And so it actually powers on the simple metal Chanukia that you see at the top there. There are small little LEDs, and the rig was generating about 5 volts of electricity yesterday, and it was lighting up all of the lights of the Hanukkah menorah. And then once we're done, either we can cut out where the leads are so we're not getting where the metal was in the potato, and you could use the potatoes to make latkes, or you could just add them to compost and return them back to the soil. But it was a way of playing with the idea of sustainability and Hanukkah. And the beauty of the Hanukkah menorah, the latke menorah, is it's a reminder, the potato batteries, to me, it's a reminder of we put all this effort into growing food, and by using the potato battery, you're able to see the energy that's generated by all of the effort you put into growing it. It was just a way of bringing the garden and Hanukkah together.
You're muted, Rachel.
If someone who has their phone ringing could just mute themselves quickly.
That was me, sorry.
Oh, never mind. In that case, never mind. Thanks so much. It seems like there's a lot of enthusiasm about the idea of a potato menorah. I'm just going to open up. Oh, and Ryan is asking, Michael, do you have a write-up on how you made this potato menorah that you could share out?
So I can certainly share the articles that included some of the instructions for how you do a potato battery, and I can get some of the instructions from the gentleman that put it together. What my plan is to do is to take the concept. Part of this was just to make sure that the concept worked, and to be able to take it and put it into a more stable rig. It's in a cardboard box with wires all around, and so we were already talking about yesterday making it into something that was more of a stable platform to be able to do this on a little bit of a bigger scale. So yes, and did I share when I shared the sustainability? Did I share the information for that we were using for the potato menorah?
Michael, I don't think you sent it to me, but once you have it, you should send it out to the whole listserv, because it seems like there's a lot of interest in potential building a potato menorah as well.
Okay. And it looks like
great
that they do one in Denver. I'm seeing on the chat, so they might have a bit different way that the rig is put together.
Yes. If anyone has a creative hashtag for posting their potato menorah on Facebook, so hashtag Hazon Seal, but as to Ryan's suggestion for a national network of potato menorah, please post your pictures of potato menorahs, hashtag potato menorah, just so we know everywhere that we're reaching out for this innovative kind of battery. And we are going to, we're going to we're going to move on right now to hear from Jeremy Kranowitz, who just joined us as the Managing Director of Sustainability and Community Engagement at Hazon. He's going to be supporting the Hazon Seal in a bunch of different ways, and we're going to get to benefit from his expertise all across, but this is a special chance for him to share some of the things that he's been working on. If you have other ideas about exciting Hanukkah stuff, feel free to type them into the chat box and share while we're going on.
Great. Can we just go one more? So welcome everyone. I'm delighted to join you all, and I'm excited to really start working and engaging with each of you and with the seal overall. One of the things that really excited me right before I joined Hazon, and I just joined November 1st, was the idea of all the amazing stories that I'd already heard about some of the really good sustainability efforts that were going on at various seal sites. And so what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes with this webinar and talk about the power of story, and also help us collectively imagine what could be done if the sky was the limit. And so one example that I just wanted to share at a very high level is in my previous work, I was the executive director of a nonprofit called Sustainable America. And one of the things that we did was we were doing a lot of work around food waste and trying to reduce food waste nationally. And what we discovered was that the folks that were the most engaged around issues of food waste tended to be married women who lived either on the East Coast or the West Coast. And so we very strategically said to ourselves, what can we do that would be at a really large scale, show a really big impact, and be the opposite of our choir? And so we said, well, the opposite of married women living on the East Coast and West Coast is NASCAR. That seemed to be the polar opposite. And so we actually found a way to work our way into folks NASCAR. We're able to go to 3 separate NASCAR races and work with their kitchens on a variety of different sustainability projects. But this slide shows what we were able to do at just one institution, the Richmond International Speedway in Virginia, where we were able to divert over 6,000 meals that were perfectly healthy, perfectly edible, and normally would have gone into the trash, and instead put them into a refrigerated truck and bring it to a shelter that was about 2 miles away from the racetrack. Most of the food scraps that were not easily shareable and edible were also, of course, getting thrown into the dumpster. We were able to divert about 33,000 pounds of food scraps to compost. There was a significant amount of greenhouse gases that we were able to avoid. And just in aggregate, it was an enormous improvement just from literally working in the kitchen at a giant racetrack. I'm not suggesting that we will all go from our local shul or JCC to the local football stadium or NASCAR track, but I think we can do a lot of big thinking. And when you start sharing stories that are at this magnitude, I think, A, it shows collectively what the total impact could be for all of the SEAL sites. But I also want to just plant a seed that potentially you might be starting with something small, and that's amazing. And let's not hold that back. We can think about things that are at a much bigger scale. The next example I just wanted to share with folks is potentially more applicable, more interesting to what each of you is doing right now. So in addition to doing some consulting work with NASCAR, I've got some experience doing work with smaller organizations. We did efforts with a top 10 law firm in Washington, D.C. They had the 11 floors of a 12-story building on a prestigious street address near the White House. they were competing with other top 10 law firms and brought us in to think about how we could help them with their overall sustainability. We did an audit, very similar in many ways to the Hazon audit, and discovered a bunch of interesting things along the way. They were trying to do the right thing. They were buying compostable cups and plates and flatware, but they were not conscious of where all of that was going. And so actually it was all getting thrown in the trash. And these were very smart people, but we had to remind them that trash doesn't magically separate itself and go into different streams of recyclable or not, or compostable or not. And so there was actually an education that had to be done with this firm to go beyond just taking that first step of actually buying compostable materials. It actually entailed a bit more than just that. But something else that was really interesting was that this was a law firm where the goal was to keep all of their associates, at their desks billing as much as they could during the day. That's what they were trying to do, like any good law firm would. So they had a dining facility on site. They were trying to do fairly healthy meal options for their employees. But one of the things that was interesting was that they were also cooking and preparing a lot of surplus food. And so there were two pieces to this. One was that a lot of that surplus, if handled by, again, the folks that were in the dining facility, were able to package that up and donate it. It actually created a tax incentive for the law firm for the food donation, but it also had the surprising effect of really energizing and motivating their dining staff, where they typically would have a lot of turnover. These were typically low-paying jobs, but there was such a raised level of enthusiasm and interest because many of them had either had times in their lives where they had been hungry or they knew people who were going hungry. And so the fact that this surplus food was going to something beneficial actually had a surprising effect, we found, of encouraging them to stay, reducing staff turnover, engaging those staff in a new and exciting way. That was pretty exciting. Another piece of that was that we worked with a company that I think we may be sharing with Seal Sites going forward, that was offering ways to better calculate how much food they should be buying in the first place and preparing in the first place so that there was less surplus at the tail end that got wasted. And then the last thing that I will mention, just as a surprise that came out of this, and which I think also hopefully will resonate with each of you, is that, as I mentioned, this was a top 10 law firm. They were competing for the top talent coming out of law school. They also wanted to steal talent from the other top 10 law firms that were in town and bring them to their firm. And one of the things that came out of the sustainability efforts that we did with this firm is that they found that, all else being equal, if the compensation was the same, the address was the same, the type of work was the same, the firm that was more sustainable had a leg up on their other counterparts. And that was a motivating factor for top talent coming out of law schools and for others that were thinking of changing firms. And so I sit on the board of my own Reform Synagogue. I know the one big motivator that we have is keeping our existing members and attracting new ones. I think that actually can be part of a really interesting story that is a way of engaging your members and attracting new ones. If you can tell a really strong sustainability story, and potentially it's a way of not only doing what's right as a Jewish value, but also doing things that might be attractive to others. And so I'll pause there. I'm happy to go into more detail on any particular questions, and also, Rachel, happy to turn it over as need be.
We have a couple of minutes, so if anyone on the phone has any questions about what was just said or questions about how to tell your story, you can either just jump in or type them in the chat box now.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So hi, I'm Becky. I'm with Hazon in Boulder, and I work with a lot of SEAL sites and many other Jewish organizations to make changes. And one of the things that I find is that the people who are interested in doing this work are motivated by environmental reasons. They want to steward the earth well, and it's often a not even had thought or a very distant thought of, oh, how do we monopolize and how do we capitalize on these changes we're making to help our community in other ways? Either the ripple effect of other people at their homes wanting to do this, but also how do we do this to strengthen our organization overall, attract more members, get press coverage, etc. And so I'm just wondering, in these Jewish environments where you have a lot of these people on this call are volunteers or their staff with, like, thank you, a very busy full plate, just like what that dynamic is and how you get yourself over the hump of, oh my God, we just worked so hard to get this solar on. Okay, now let's go to zero waste. Wait. Let's tell everybody about solar. So just curious if you just address that dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think certainly, there's always that motivation to say, okay, let's run to the next thing. But I think you're totally right, Becky, that pausing, especially to celebrate the success, is a really important piece of this. And I think there also can sometimes be a little bit of, I don't know if it's fear or guilt, but worry about doing too much to self-promote and to brag. I think that it's just a way of changing the framing in a way that we are excited about what our own journey of discovery and about what we've been able to accomplish and the savings that we've been able to make or the improvements that we've been able to make. And so we are hoping to share that information so that others can come in. More directly to your question, though, which is how do you find that time or that space from a large number of volunteers? One of the things that, I would say that there are two things. One is hopefully there's an ability to work with the site where you and their social media presence to be able to talk about these things openly, and not just that we got it done, but you can actually talk about some of the process of how you got it done, what was challenging, how you overcame that. That's really interesting as part of the storytelling as well. And so hopefully you've got that ability to either write that up and offer that to the webmaster to post, or to put it into your site's newsletter. And I would say that it's surprising how far some of these posts can go when we ourselves put them on our social media feeds. On Facebook and on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on some of these other sites, it's amazing sometimes when someone posts some sort of interesting story or accomplishment or other thing that they were able to help do, how wide and far some of that can go just by ourselves. And so, sometimes these aren't done by an individual, often it's by a committee. The ability of each of those folks on the committee to post something and watch it spread, I think is a great place and a great way to do that. But I would also just end with a question, which could be, would it be useful to this group for us to start collecting and sharing more of those stories? Because I think that would be helpful, and we could use our own internal resources of marketing and communications to share more of those sustainability stories, create reciprocal links, and try to do some of that work on your behalf, because that's of interest to us here at Hazon as well. So would that be useful? Because we would love to be able to help you with all of that. I'm just going to assume that might be a yes.
This is Rabbi Sean here. I'll ditto the yes if I could, and just appreciate you kind of bringing a more systemic look at it. I mentioned in the comments on the side, it's hard to sometimes present and use chat. And most Zoom calls I do, we don't do chat anymore while we're talking to each other. But I know you're collecting information here, which is great, and that can be sent out after. So I just mentioned in the chat that we went fully compostable for our High Holy Days this year, with the emphasis also on fair trade, local, and organic. And it was important to put that in all the High Holy Day material so that the compost wasn't a sidebar issue, but there was, in the booklet, on the website, and to make that extra step to find a compost company who would come and pick it up, so that it wasn't, yay, we did compost, so that can go more to the trash. I think that was really key. And I know that message from the BIMA as well, and the materials, it added, to a sense of folks feeling that their prayers had more meaning, and weren't just, praying for the teshuva or well-being of the planet, but we're actually doing some action that way. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And one statistic that I will add and throw in is that food waste is actually something that is such an important issue, and I think it's something that so many of these seal sites can and should be doing, but it's also surprisingly a really important issue if your members are really worried about environment and climate, because if you looked at how much food gets wasted across the planet, it's about 1/3 of all the food that is grown gets wasted, and when that gets discarded and rots, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from all of that would, if it were its own country, be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. It would be China, the US, food waste, and then India as the largest countries of greenhouse gas emissions. And so if we collectively can do something around that, I think it's not just a message about food waste and composting. It's actually part of a really big story about climate change as well. And so you can share those pieces. And there's more details that we can share and stats that we can share if that also would be helpful going forward.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Rabbi Michael, I saw you typed in a question about commercial composting, which we can, if you have any comments on that, otherwise we can follow up afterwards about thoughts about composting without commercial composting.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, and especially in New York, there are just space constraints that are difficult. So they're in a variety of different places in New York, in Colorado, in a number of different cities. You often have compost peddlers who are small firms that will actually come and pick up, a pail and then give you a clean pail and take yours away and do that on a very small scale. And I know that there are, in particular, there are folks in New York and in Boulder and in Boston and in a bunch of other cities where I know we have seal sites. So that's happening at a very small scale. But there are always opportunities if you've got even just a little bit of space for a garden, even if it's window boxes or something like that. There are ways of doing on-site composting that can be very space limited, that are in enclosed systems that don't smell, that don't attract rodents, and that could be another source. Again, that would be at a much smaller scale, but there are options that would range from small to large, depending, and we've got some suggestions that we could offer offline and after this webinar as well.
And I'll mention, this is Becky again, that you can do composting on your site without having a place to use it. So just because you're composting, it doesn't mean, oh my God, do we have to start a garden project now? You will have many members who would be delighted to take your compost home to their own home garden. So those two don't have to go in tandem. And I'll specifically mention that Ramah in the Rockies was a seal site from a prior cohort, and they did an amazing project with a specific method of composting called bokashi. So Ramah is a summer camp, and so you can imagine the massive quantities food waste that they had, and they found they were very successful with this. And part of their project with doing the seal was to create a guide for others to use. So we have that here at Hazon. So if you're interested in learning about the bokashi method of composting, if you're dealing with large quantities, you can learn from one of your fellow seal partners.
And I see Robert Fishman has your hand raised if you had a question.
Thank you very much. So it's part question, part comment, and I'm with volunteer at Shir Shalom in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and we're sort of right at the border between Ridgefield, Connecticut, and the town of Lewisboro, New York. So we have this nice organization, two communities coming together. And we're just getting started on our program, and one of the things that that I'd like to be able to do is not just take on the energy savings or the composting or whatnot within our own shul, within our congregation, but also, as you said, to tell the story of what we're doing within the congregation. And then maybe that goes out in the newsletters, but to let people know how that's working and what they can do at home. And I'd like to think that there's a way that we can collect those stories at home and bring them back into the congregation. So, for example, if we say we're changing some light bulbs here and look how much that's saving us in kilowatt hours and what that reduces in greenhouse gas emissions, or we're doing a compost project and look what that's saving in food waste. And you can do that at home too. And here's how you can tell us what you've done at home and share those stories with other congregants, because after all, this is these are Jewish values, or things that can be done at home or in your local business, in your small business perhaps, and bring those stories back in. Now, I don't know if we can take credit for those greenhouse gas emission savings. It would be wonderful if we could, but the point is to at least get those stories brought back, and it's not just what we're doing in the congregation in the building, but it's the congregation writ large. And I'm wondering what resources there might be available at Hazon, or that might be able to be developed, so that we can collect these stories and quantify that as data coming back into the program.
So let me answer one piece of this, and then I'll see if Rachel can answer the other piece. So I think your point is a wonderful one, and of course, one of the best ways that the seal can have the most impact in the world is if we mention it and we talk about it, not just what's happening at our respective institutions, but then, yes, absolutely encouraging all of our members to go out and try to change one or more things in their own daily lives that remind them that sustainability is really a Jewish value. So to the extent that your members can go out and do something and then share that with you, and if you can aggregate that. I had 27 members that have respectively changed 500 light bulbs in their own homes. That absolutely counts, because even if they were maybe thinking about it, maybe they were inclined to do it, maybe they were going to get there eventually anyway, this is the catalyst. This action is what said, okay, right, I need to just get off my rear and go forward and do it. And so absolutely, I feel like we can take credit. And similarly, we are going in the coming months to be working really hard to try to make it easy for synagogues and for JCCs and for other commercial institutions to figure out how to go forward with solar, if that makes sense, and especially if it's a way to help save money. And maybe there are some that are already inclined or already interested in doing it and just didn't know how to get started or just didn't know how to take the first step. If the seal can help them take the first step, absolutely, we want to take credit for that. And because again, it's a change that was made that resulted in a faster outcome or a different outcome. And so absolutely, we should encourage it, and we should embrace it, and we should celebrate it and count it.
Yeah, and just as Jeremy was speaking, I was jotting down a few other ideas of ways that you can track that congregates are being influenced by what you're doing. One is through, I know that a bunch of the synagogues on this call have a CSA, where they are a CSA pickup site. They know their members are bringing it home, and that can be a time when people are coming to pick up their CSA vegetables. Ask them, like, how is this changing your eating habits? How are you buying more food that's local or organic because of the CSA? That's one. Annie Fox at Ohev Shalom, who I don't think is on this call, but if you are, she can speak a little bit more about it. They did a great thing where they did a rescued food potluck to try and highlight how people could use food waste. They had a little competition where they asked people to bring in a dish that either included ugly produce or leftovers or like things that were used in creative ways, and encouraged people to bring their habits, and then brought that there and gave out some prizes for the most creative use of vegetables. That's another thing that came up. And then there's also the idea there, Jeremy mentioned solar, but there's also the idea of a community solar challenge. So you challenge, like, we want to try and get 15 members of our community to put solar on their own homes. In New York State and possibly in other states, you can actually get grants from some nonprofit organizations if you reach a certain amount of community solar goals, if you get like 15 congregants to sign up for solar. So we can send out a little bit more information about what that entails after the call, but those are all some really trackable ways. I'm actually going to pivot a little bit, and we're going to get a chance to hear from some stories from the site about people who have done a really good job telling their story creatively. And I'm going to turn over first to Larissa from B'nai Jeshurun. And Larissa, also, just because you've done such a good job with the community composting, maybe you could also just say a word about that and what you've been able to do there in terms of getting community participation.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Larissa Wall. I'm the Tzedek program manager at B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side in New York City. And what Rachel just shared with you is a snapshot of one of a few emails that we sent out around Giving Tuesday, which I hope everybody knows about, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, a day to think about giving to causes and to, rather than consuming, donating money towards causes that are supporting issues and things that you value. So this was our second year of focusing on sustainability at BJ around Giving Tuesday, and it's been very successful. So we started this Give Your Green to Go Green campaign last year to raise some money for some of our sustainability projects. And this year we upped our game and we asked for money for a living/green wall, which is currently being installed on our 6th floor patio. We don't quite have access to our upper roof yet. There's some construction going on there, but that's being implemented right now, which is exciting, and we're hoping to build a partnership with the school that's occupying the 5th and 6th floor roof, 5th and 6th floors, to do some education around that and engage our community in education, and then also to raise money for an energy audit. So we use this moment during the year when people are thinking about donating and giving to focus on a smaller project. So to rather than asking just for general money, it was important for us to name the price of the things that we wanted to raise money for, and then to really target folks who we think would be interested in giving around this time. So last year was successful. This year we still haven't closed it out. We're going to be posting a time-lapse video of the installation as a way to show people what we're doing, and then just make one final push to ask for more money for an energy audit, which we hope to be completing in the next couple of months through NYSERDA, which is a New York State organization that helps nonprofits complete energy audits. And then just to talk a little bit about our community composting initiative, a few years ago, so we've been part of the New York City composting program through the Department of Sanitation. We are lucky enough to be a nonprofit, and we're able to enroll in that and don't have to worry about commercial pickup. So we actually have curbside pickup at both of our buildings on 89th and 88th Street. And we launched it in the community, and we told folks to bring in compost from home. We had a flyer, we had a bunch of emails, and people reached out to me about what they could compost, and we really encouraged people to do that. And our rabbis now do it and will let me know if the bin is out of place and not there and missing. And we have even community members who are not part of the synagogue who have called me to ask if we're still doing it, and have said that they use it because we try to keep some of our bins on the curb or on the sidewalk so that it's noticeable for passersby. So, we're contributing to New York City composting in that way, and I know that it's also changed the habits of some of our members who didn't compost before, who were scared of compost, but have now, even though it's challenging for them in their sometimes small New York City apartments, to figure out a way to collect it and bring it. There's more I could talk about, and happy to, chat offline about it, or I don't know if there's an opportunity for questions, but happy to speak more about either of these if you're interested.
Yeah, we definitely have a few minutes for questions if anyone has a question for Larissa.
I just wanted to say, this is Jonathan Rubenstein. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So I was a couple minutes late, and instead of, I'm not sure if you called on me to give the little devar, but I'm just going to post it as a chat and not take up time now.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. We did call on you, but yeah, if you can share it in the chat, and we can email it out afterwards too to share some words about Hanukkah and sustainability.
Yeah.
Great. So if anyone has any questions for Larissa, you can type them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it over to Jewish Ferndale and Hannah Finman. Oh, here also on the bottom, this is a picture of the living wall that they mentioned. Larissa just mentioned, which is really cool. But I'm going to pass it over to Hannah Finman and Jewish Ferndale to talk a little bit about what you've been doing in terms of publicity.
Unmute?
There we go. Go ahead.
Hi. Did we unmute okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Hannah Finman.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
This is my husband, Herschel Finman. And so we're from Jewish Ferndale. And I think we're supposed to be talking about PR and getting things into newspapers and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we did that was interesting newsworthy wise was removing some garage doors that were built. We built an art studio, and we used them to create high-rise boxes for accessibility garden for wheelchair people and stuff like that. And that was really interesting to people. So I think that part of, we had some really nice stories that went to different newspapers and different websites around the United States and abroad, were because they're just doing weird things that were successful. In those beds, we had hundreds of plants, and we had a few programs where people came and picked herbs for the first time, fresh herbs, and eggplants or whatever, and it just looked good. It felt good too, and we had a lot of nice feedback about that. So just a nice win-win happy story is a nice thing to send out. And if you do your local Jewish newspapers and sending it out to some of the big Jewish interest websites, it gets around. It seems like all the news services are hungry. They want fodder for stories. Of course, my husband has had a radio show for 20 years. It doesn't hurt because he has a lot of connections because he's always looking for stories as well. So if it's something that has a nice warm tone to it, just get it out there. Good begets good. Yes, and Herschel, you might have something to say about specific places where you send stories that people might be interested in.
You mentioned the local news outlets, but we heard before from that the use of social media is just exponentially can't be underestimated. Just by putting something on Facebook or Instagram, just as an example, I just put a picture on Facebook of a menorah I put on my car yesterday. And a news outlet in Israel called me up, and they want to do a whole story about Jewish Ferndale now because they heard about all the wonderful things that we're doing with environmentalism and attracting people into sustainability.
Any questions? Okay.
Great, thank you so much.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, happy Hanukkah.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, shoot.
I'm just curious how much you use in general take. There's like a norm of like formal press releases and you get the quote and, you know, and then sometimes there's just shooting an email off to somebody. We're doing this really cool thing. How much do you think it's the format and doing it right versus you actually have something really interesting to say in terms of being effective and getting press coverage?
It depends, because we've been in Detroit for 30 years, and we've actually probably have been here longer than most of the people working in the newspaper outlets at this point. So when someone comes into a newspaper who's like in charge of the religion or in charge of the environments, so we make it a point to go talk to them, and depending on our relationship, how friendly we are with them, if we're actually friends with them, I'll just shoot them a text. But otherwise, it's the standard format with a really good headline in the subject line that's got to be really catchy, because these people are getting stuff all the time, and if it's not going to be a catchy subject line, they're just going to delete it.
Right, and not to ever, so normal PSAs and press releases in the old standard way is great, but it's also, like you said, relationships. So a lot of the people at different newspapers and outlets we know personally now, so they're calling us, which is really nice. So make friends. Your local.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing those inspiring words, and love the focus on building relationships over sending out things. It's all about the relationship. We're going to have a couple of minutes now to go into breakout groups and share some ideas. We're going to have about 8 minutes in breakout groups. It's going to be in about 4 rooms. For anyone who hasn't used breakout groups before, in a second I'm going to push this button. You're going to get an invitation to go into a breakout group. And in that group, I'm going to copy and paste some questions to discuss into the chat. But basically, the questions that we have for you to discuss is how is sustainability currently publicized at your organization? Are you using social media? Are you using press releases? Are you using announcements? And how else could you tell your sustainability story to engage new members and attract donors? So those are the questions overall. It's a chance to brainstorm. You'll have about 6 minutes. And you're going to get a chance. It says open all rooms. If you're on the phone, you're just going to automatically be at a conversation with just 4 people. So I'm opening it now.
Okay, how does this work? Okay, join.
Sure. Is anyone who's here, is anyone not in a group? Oh,
yeah,
hi, Becky and
of
Sarah.
us here.
I think I didn't put you in groups because I thought you were me. Okay, I'm going to put you in a group right now. Sarah doesn't need to be a group.
We're happy. I'm happy to work for 10 minutes and just pay.
Okay, we'll just take 10 minutes. Ellen, do you want to be in a group? I could think that Ellen might. I think Ellen just didn't join a group. Some of these groups didn't join. Okay, well, we can just work for 10 minutes. Anne, are you there? Do you want to join a group? Okay. Oh, because some people left.
Right.
I have a lot of questions to ask. about how that's being publicized and how we might publicize more stuff. I see Rachel on the screen. Whoops. Hi.
So,
Did you say you were going to post some questions?
Well, I'm thinking of questions to ask of the congregation staff and of other people on other committees. Like, how do we publicize? Do we even have, I mean, I was looking on my iPhone while we were in the webinar to see if there's a Facebook page. I guess I need some help with this because I'm not.
We posted some questions, but I just broadcast them again, so you'll be able to see them.
Oh, how is sustainable? Okay.
it's interesting as I see it, because there's two layers of it. One is within the congregation, telling the sustainability, because we have members of our congregation that probably don't realize we have solar panels on our building, or even a garden here. And people all will say, oh, the grounds look beautiful, but I don't even know if they realize that there's purposeful garden and Jewish education behind some of the gardens. And then there's the second layer of how do you tell
to be able to use their, the sermons and their Devar Torahs during the week, the year, to promote those kinds of things. And again, very similar kinds of things through the religious school, through the temple bulletin, through the e-newsletters that go out and emails. Those are all different ways to, communicate to the Jewish community. So.
Well, Rachel's on the line. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Hi, we're popping from group to group.
So, Margot, what would you say were from the prior? We're going to we exchanged information about to the question, Rachel. But I just want to go back to something Margot said when she was talking about her synagogue. What in the prior committee that you had, what would you say were the 2 or 3 biggest achievements of your committee, and how were those publicized?
So I think they were, it seemed sort of small at the time, but now that they've become the way we do things. So just that for Onegs, all the plates and Kiddush cups, and even for religious school, for when they do the challah and do the blessings, we have little tiny, glasses that are used, and then they get washed. And so we had sort of a zero waste for the Onegs and for temple events. And so, that was kind of a big deal. We, did recycling bins. We got a bike rack put in front of the temple. So I think, I feel like, in fact, one of the things we're talking about with the new committee as it's reinvigorated is we did an awful lot. We didn't realize sort of how much we did until we started looking at the Hazon and what kinds of things can you do? And we're like, oh, we did that. Oh, we did that. Oh, we did that. So, that was kind of exciting for us.
Well, just you said 3 things that were really, we don't do any of them. So thank you. Because the idea of reusable glasses, we're trying to do a compostable Kiddush as one of our 3 things, but I actually love the idea, because we do have a dishwasher, machine, not a person, a machine, in our kitchen. So, what do you use, shot glasses?
They're like little shot glasses, exactly. They're like little glasses.
Yeah.
And it basically, it took the power of one forceful person to just make sure that she would go on Sunday mornings and make sure that when all of the classes, took the trays with the glasses, and that she would make sure they got loaded into the dishwasher. So now that's just part of people's routine, but it was pushing past that bump,
Yeah, I love that. And so just back to the thing, how were these are all good things. Were they celebrated? Do you have some kind of, just smash a bottle of champagne against the bike rack or something? Or, You know.
I don't know. When you're busy doing it, you're just glad that the damn thing is in and you got that project done, and then you sort of forget to celebrate it, I think, a lot of the times.
Yeah. Because I think just having the bike rack in front of the temple.
Welcome back to the main conversation. It'll take everyone a minute or so to come
It's always
join us.
Going with that, lead for the story and then building from there.
We're back in the main session now. We only have a couple more minutes, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to speak about next steps in the seal. So as you come back in and you join us, if you had one or two insights from your conversation, please share those in the chat. Again, you don't need to read all of those now. You can if you want to, but we're going to share those out after so we can share some of those insights. So again, for those who just joined us, I'm going to invite you to share in the chat. Is everyone back now?
Thanks.
As everyone, wow, everyone just came back. Okay, so I'm going to invite everyone as you come back, I'm going to go over now some of the next steps for the seal, but I don't want to lose all of the great conversations that just came out. So if you had one or two insights, please type them in the chat box, and then we will share some of those learnings out when we send an email out afterwards. So I'm going to return to our presentation and just briefly go over. I'm just going to briefly go over what's going to happen next for all of the sites who are on the call. So this is for every site that started either in spring 2017 or before. So that's if you started this spring or before, this is especially applying for you. If you started this fall, this is going to apply to you next summer, so you're welcome to stay on the call and learn about what's happening with the Hazon seal process. But also, if you have to jump off now, that's fine. So for anyone who started last spring, we've gone through a bunch of these stages. You had a green team, you took an audit, announced participation in the seal, went through the consulting calls, and now it's time to actually talk about this last stage, which is receiving the Hazon seal certification and renewing your commitment to sustainability for the coming year. So that's the next stage of the Hazon seal process, and I'm just going to explain briefly what that involves. So, so after this call, we're going to send out to all of the sites who started, again, in spring 2017 and before, we're going to send you a renewal form. The renewal form has three parts. One part is basically saying, this is the progress that we made on our 3 projects so far. That could be you finished a project, you made meaningful progress. The second part is to provide some feedback on the Hazon seal process. We're always looking to improve. This is only the second year of the program. So we're asking you to really be thoughtful and reflective on how we can improve the program in the coming year. And the third part, which is probably the most important part, this is the renewal part. The third part of this form asks you about what are your priorities for 2018. So sustainability is a constant process. You're not done. You're just recommitting for the following year. So the preferred deadline for that form, which we're going to send out right after this call, is January 15th. However, it's a rolling basis. So if you get the form into us before January 15th, you will get your certification earlier. If you decide, you know what, we actually want to wait until we have our program in February or even in March to send in that form and certify, and you want to wait a little bit longer, that's also fine. Just please be in touch with us and say, like, we need a couple of more months to work on our projects, and then send that form in when you're ready. We might follow up with you with some questions, but assuming that all goes well, we will send out to you an actual physical certificate, Hazon seal sustainability for 2017. You can see on the right some really excited staff members at Isabella Friedman when they received their Hazon seal of sustainability. And another thing to think about during this process is we just talked about the importance of celebrating. So this should be something that should be celebrated. We have in the past, if you're in an area with Hazon staff, especially in New York, we can talk about actually coming to you and doing an award ceremony, or you can figure out some sort of award ceremony on your own. Happy to help you brainstorm what that would look like. So definitely think about how you're going to celebrate the fact that you got this achievement. So that's part one of this process. The second part is that you're going to continue working on you're going to continue working on sustainability projects. So I'm sorry, what just happened? So after you renew, in 2018, you're still a part of the Hazon Seal of Sustainability. So what's required for 2018, your second year, is it's required that you continue working on 3 sustainability projects with your green team. So your green team is still meeting, you're still working on projects. Then it's also required that you collect data on those projects. We spoke a little bit about the importance of data, and we'll be sharing some resources to make that easier. And it's also required that you publicize participating in the seal. And the last thing is that it is required each year at the end of the year to submit the year-end renewal form. So this is all that's required in 2018 after you submit that renewal form to stay in the seal of sustainability. All that's required to continue working on your project, submit your year-end renewal form. Some things that are not required but are optional is, unlike the first year of participating in the Hazon Seal, you do not need to have consulting calls with Hazon staff. We won't reach out to you and say, do you want to have a consulting call? You are welcome at any point to reach out to us for resources or support. Happy to talk through ideas with you, but it's not required. You're welcome but not required to attend Hazon Seal webinars as a second year site. And you are welcome but not required to go back and retake one of those audits. You don't need to take that in the second year, but it is a great resource for you to see both how much you've changed and to get new projects. So that's the general overview of what's going to happen next for the seal. Does anyone have any questions about that? You can just jump in or type in the chat box. Okay, we're also going to send out an email with all of this in very detailed instructions. So if you didn't understand this piece, you'll get it also in a written form. And you can always, if you have any questions, to contact myself or Shaketa in New York, Brittany in Detroit, or Sarah or Becky in Colorado, depending on where you are, to talk more about any of this process. So I want to thank everyone so much for being on this call and for sharing so much and thinking about how to increase the story that you're telling about sustainability. And we will be back with more webinars in a couple of weeks. We are planning a few coming up, including one with someone about installing solar panels and a few other exciting webinars, one about energy efficiency. So keep an eye out for those, and we will be in touch soon. And happy Hanukkah, everyone.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. Thank you so much.
Happy Hanukkah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Just finished just